So our next point here is managing the athlete. So this is where we need to start to think about the smaller details of what's actually happening on competition day. So pretty much any given competition, I'm probably managing like 7 to 10 lifters. Like I am the game day coach for 7 to 10 lifters typically, and you're managing a lot of the sort of like expectations and behaviors that we talked about in part one. But you also have to be aware of how each of those individual people sort of act and feel on competition day too, and that can be quite varied. So what you want to start to think about is where are they where are they on track in terms of like, are they going to make their weight class? How are they feeling? What are their nerves like, and what do they need? So the biggest thing that I do for everybody is make sure that they all have a game day sheet and they all have really clear expectations of what their win conditions are the week leading up to that competition. So everybody has a plan A, a plan B, and a plan A plus. All right. So it's like normal performance, not so good performance, fantastic performance. And then we're always trying to create a little bit of wiggle room in between those so that people can understand that, there is a bit of flexibility. We don't just want to sort of dogmatically approach a single goal because like we said in section one, that can often end up with you having some subpar performances. So you really want to make sure that everybody has asked the questions that they need to ask, in the few days, probably 48, 72 hours before a meet. Make sure that they don't have any questions. Do you have any questions? What do you need to know? How are you feeling? Like, is there anything that I can clear up for you? Make sure that they have all of their equipment 1 to 2 days before the competition that needs to be sorted. So do you have your socks, your belt, your singlet, your shirt, spare pair of socks, shoes for the deadlift and bench, shoes for the squat, knee sleeves, wrist wraps, whatever that happens to be, but make sure that that is sorted. Okay, leave nothing to chance. There should be no surprises on the day. In terms of what's actually happening in like the room itself, one thing that I get all of my lifters to do is make sure that they're arriving to the room a good 20 to 30 minutes early, and that they go to the warm-up area and then sort of stake themselves out some real estate. So you want to get a good spot, right? You want to make sure that if it's a particularly cold day, that you're close to the heaters. If it's a particularly hot day, that you're close to a fan. How accessible are the toilets? How accessible is the platform? Do you have to navigate anything in order to get there? Because the fewer obstacles between your lifter and that platform, in my opinion, the better the day they will have. And so you also need to take into consideration, I had a meet where I was managing a lifter a few years ago, and it was a bit of a schmozzle sort of meet. Like it was, I don't know, it's a novice meet. There were 40 people in one group. Just way too many people, just way too many people. And it was freezing cold, absolutely freezing in this massive shed of a gym. No heating available. It was raining. Everybody was really miserable. And so you've got 40 lifters, which means you've probably got like 20, 25 minutes in between attempts. And so you have to start thinking, how is this going to affect the plan that I've put in place for my lifter? And you have to start thinking on the fly. Like your ability as a coach to manage your lifter well on the day, you have to do a lot of critical thinking, and you have to do a lot of thinking on the spot, like I said. So what we actually ended up doing was having her not only put on all of her track pants, hoodie, everything in between her attempts, but we started warming her up as soon as we could in the warm-up room, and then hit her opening attempt in the warm-up room. So that all we had to do essentially was, that was on the squat, hit the opening attempt in there, and then all we had to do was hit the second attempt as her first attempt, third attempt as the second, then scratch, then go warm up and do that again for benching and deadlifting. And it ended up being reasonably successful. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was certainly a much better plan than leaving her to the sharks like she was with this really poorly managed meet. And that just happens sometimes. Like, meets aren't going to be perfect. Sometimes they will be poorly managed by design, or sometimes they will be poorly managed just because the universe decided to throw a spanner in the works, and now the scorekeeping isn't working. Now, I don't even know, maybe one of the referees hasn't shown up. Just something's always going to happen. So you as a coach need to assume the worst, not the worst as in like people will behave badly, but you need to be ready to roll with the punches and change your plans. So I refer to that as being like really flexible in the approach, but firm in the outcome. Like, we know what the outcome has to be. So what do we actually have to change about our approach to that in order to achieve the same outcome? Like, do we have to compromise on that outcome yet? Probably not. So the group size, the layout of the room, all of those details really matter, because any little thing will make it feel as though your lifter has just been derailed. Like, they're really going to feel it. So just fine tuning those small details is going to make a big difference. Now, making sure that your lifter has food that isn't just Oreos and gummy bears and cans of Monster Energy White is really important too. Okay, they're going to start to, especially if they're a newer lifter or multiple newer lifters, they're going to be hanging around the platform all day. They're going to be really sapped of energy. So just making sure that when they finished an attempt, they don't hang around the platform and have the crowd sap their energy, because that like nervous energy, that anxious energy in the room, it will be exhausting to them. So just getting them used to going, sitting down, getting some food in, getting some water in, whatever they have to do to, stay warm, stay focused, but actually dial themselves down is very important at that point. Now, the food situation will differ, lifter to lifter. But in my experience, certainly with heavier lifters, you want more consistent and more like solid food available. You can probably get away with light snacks with lighter lifters, but I think for the most part, they're probably just better with something solid in their stomach to make them feel a bit more settled. And of course, plenty of fluid, but not, so much that they're running to the toilet all the time. Now, another small thing is just making sure that your attempt booklets are filled out with your signature ahead of time. Okay, make sure that you've got all of those signed ahead of time. Make sure that you have all of your hard information sorted before then. And I think just those small details there it seems like a really sort of small amount of detail, like I said, but it does make a difference, and it will make your life a lot easier. Just especially when it comes to managing multiple people, just having a system in place where you know precisely what you want them to do, you know precisely how to manage those people, and you've communicated it ahead of time, it will make it easier. Now, managing outcomes, right? Good or bad, what can be learned? How do we actually make this a reflective process? So in my mind, a good outcome is all white lights, or at least the lifter feels fairly positive about the result regardless. Sometimes you're going to miss some lifts, and that's okay. You don't want to catastrophize that. I don't think we necessarily need to say like 9 white lights is the win condition, because if they don't get a white light, they might feel as though they failed. And so we need to be very cautious with our language and, again, how we manage expectations there. But I think that just communicating that a good outcome in somebody's first meet really is just getting to the end of the day without bombing is pretty solid. But if they do bomb, which is still a likelihood, then you need to be prepared for that outcome as well. And it always needs to be a reflective process. So, you, especially like when they're on the platform, you're going to have a tendency to almost overcoach. Like, you're going to want to analyze everything. You're going to want to rationalize everything. You're going to want to sort of like not let them be emotional, and you're going to try to cue them out of technique. And as a coach, that's probably some of the worst stuff that you can do. Like, you got to remember that by the time your lifter gets to the platform, it's too late to change their technique. Like competition day, you would not be changing technique. So even just the idea of like cueing technique on the platform, in my opinion, is pretty useless. You should probably be queuing for confidence, not technique. I don't think you could create any kind of meaningful change with technique at all at that point. So just small things like be confident, tight, big energy, big power. Those small things I think are a lot better than, foot here, pronate, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's useless for them. They're not going to hear it. And, they're certainly not going to internalize it meaningfully. So, you know, how do you actually start to communicate this stuff to them, like the things that you observe later, right? You communicate it later. Your big job in having your athlete have a positive experience that day is simply communicating that to them. Be positive. Like even if they bomb, just talk to them about being proud of them, being proud of their effort, which should be genuine. You shouldn't have to fake that, right? You should be proud of them. You should be proud of them being on the platform and giving their best effort, regardless of what that looks like. And that's what you focus on. Outside of that, you want to start to think, okay, what contributed to this lifter's success and what prevented it? How could this have actually become a better outcome? How could we have created a better result here? What are the things that we need to tweak? Was it, what happened in prep? How does that need to change? But again, like I've already mentioned, a lot of this is only possible in hindsight. So your biggest responsibility really in managing the outcome is just staying positive, because if you berate or overanalyze or even, rob your lifter of their ability to just sort of like feel either sadness or, I don't know, boastfulness, if they've had a really good result, they're like really on top of the world and you tell them to pump their brakes, like don't. If they're really sad, let them be sad, but also frame it in the sense that you are proud of their efforts regardless of that outcome. And, the two of you are going to touch base on how to more appropriately plan and manage those outcomes moving forward after the meet. But just let them go enjoy it. Let them feel what they need to feel. And if they feel sad, tell them that it's okay to feel sad, that, it sucks and that you wish that they'd had a better day. But again, you're proud of them. And then start to think about how you can take the lessons you learned from that day to build it into future success. Because it's so crucial that lifters don't see their first competition as being like the competition. They need to understand that there's always going to be more meets. Now, at the same time, we don't want to diminish the importance of the meet at the time, but they can't be going into a meet with like a do or die attitude. Like, this is it. If I don't make it, I'm done forever. It's like, this is your first meet of many meets. There will be more meets that you are going to compete in. So you need to understand that regardless of the outcome, whether you do particularly well or particularly poorly, you're going to be competing again, because the only way you get better at competition and learn all of the things that I've actually described is by competing more, right? The only reason I'm able to talk about this right now is because I've competed enough times that I can make those observations as a coach and as a lifter and then pass them on to other people. But the best way you're ever going to learn from things like this is by experiencing it yourself. So that's all I can really say that is probably the single best way to learn how to manage lifters. And this isn't to diminish anything that I've just spoken about, but you're going to have to get your hands dirty. You're going to have to compete more often. You're going to have to coach more often. And over time, you will get probably quite good. These are just some small recommendations that I think will help guide that process for you. But at the end of the day, nothing can be a substitute for genuine experience, genuinely being the man in the arena. And that's what's important, really. That's what matters at the end of the day, is the fact that you got up and you gave it a go. Like, as a coach, you might screw it up, okay, and you might do some bonehead stuff. You'll probably put too many kgs on the bar on an attempt. You might not let them warm up. You might not have given them enough guidance in the warm-up room. Or, you might be yelling stupid cues that just confuse them and don't help them. As an athlete, you will warm up poorly. You will miss weight, okay? You will have to cut weight. You might actually bomb out. There's so many things that can happen, but it doesn't mean that you're bad or you're a bad person. It just means that maybe you had a bad meet maybe you had a great meat. If you have enough great meats, you'll have a bad one. If you have enough bad ones, you'll have a great one. But we compete because innately effort is its own reward, and your competition isn't how we progress. It's an illustration of your progress. And as long as you can remember that, you'll be able to compete forever. And the less and less pressure you put on yourself, the more you start to enjoy those meet environments. The more you'll be able to better exercise, better judgment in those meet environments, and the better results the better your results will typically be because of that. So I hope this list helps you. If you're a coach, I hope this list helps you. If you're an athlete, if you're wanting to start powerlifting soon, I think that these are just some small ways that you can really start to net some success. So as always, guys, if there's anything you want to hear from in the future, just let me know. And I'll be happy to create another vlog or podcast about it. So leave it in the comments below. Make sure to give this a like, give it a listen, and I will talk to you all soon.